public meeting, but a meeting the public can attend. I'm Councillor Susan Durant, Chair of Planning Committee. Before we commence, I'd like to outline the domestic arrangements for the meeting. We're not expecting a fire practice today. If the alarms sound, please leave the building by way of the fire exit through the doors at the rear of the chamber on my right. When you've left the chamber, proceed down the stairway and exit through the emergency exit on the ground floor. If there is anybody with mobility issues, please wait in the refuge area at the top of the stairs where the emergency evacuation lift is located and use the intercom situated to the left-hand side of the lift doors to call for assistance. The designated assembly point is in the public square in front of Cast beyond the fountain. I'd like to inform members of the public and press that today's meeting will be audio-visually recorded. And by entering the council chamber, you accept that you will be recorded and your images retained and broadcast by the council on its website and on YouTube. If anyone intends to record or film any part of today's meeting, please ensure that this does not disturb the conduct of the meeting and you only focus on recording those people participating. Please ensure that your mobile phones are switched to silent mode. May I remind anyone speaking in the meeting that you will need to press the large red button underneath the microphone and ensure the red light is illuminated, and this will ensure that you are recorded. The meeting is proceeding today on the basis that all members of the committee have read their agenda papers thoroughly and are aware of what they will be considering today. And if any members of the committee leave the chamber during consideration of an application, they should ensure that they do not take part in the vote on their return, as they will not have heard all the relevant information on that particular item. Thank you. Item 1 is apologies for absence. Are there any apologies? No? Thank you. Item 2, exclusion of press and public. There are no exempt items on today's agenda. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please? No, thank you. Therefore, item 4 is the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting that was held on the 12th of November 2024. Can the minutes be moved as a true and accurate record? Is that moved? Is that seconded? And is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. We'll just wait for members of the public to come and be seated. Application number 1 is planning application 23/02430/FUL, which is the change of use of land to a fear factory, visitor attraction and erection installation of associated two marquees. Marquee 1, which is 25 metres by 9.6 metres. Marquee 2 is 18.3 metres by 18.6. And 3, no event structures, and 6, no shipping container, number of shipping containers together with associated with works including extension of car park. Erection of marquee 2, 30.7 metres and 12.12 metres to be used for wedding events associated with the existing operation at Thornhurst Manor. This is a retrospective application. Susie Boyce is a planning case officer and will introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. So this planning application has been brought to committee due to significant public interest. The application is retrospective, except for part of the unauthorised car park extension, which is now proposed to be provided as a new biodiversity enhancement area as mitigation. The recommendation is for refusal for reasons that will be set out in this presentation. First of all, just to run through a few pre-committee amendments. Since the publishing of the officer report, there has been one additional representation of support received from a member of the public. Most of the points raised had been raised in other representations and were already covered in the report, except for one point relating to the creation of opportunities for aspiring talent. This contributes towards the social and cultural benefits brought by the development, which are assessed in full at paragraph 8.15 of the report, and may be afforded some limited weight. However, it doesn't change the overall conclusions of the assessment or of the officer's recommendation, as the benefits are still considered to be outweighed by the harms that have been identified. We have a number of requests to speak. Councillor Thomas Noon, ward member for Norton and Asken, will be speaking in support of the application. Ms Emma Rich, a member of the public, will also be speaking in support. I need to note here that Ms Rich was until very recently an employee of Fawnhurst Manor, but her employment ended on the 31st of October. And then finally, Mr Laurie Murray, the applicant, and Shane Marsh, the agent, will also be speaking in support of the application. Before I move on, we also have the Council's tree and ecology officers present who will be available to answer questions at the end. So just to introduce the site, the Red Line development area comprises about 0.75 hectares of land in the wider grounds of Fawnhurst Manor. Fawnhurst Manor is a golf course, restaurant, bar and wedding events venue located just to the east of Doncaster Road, the A19, which goes north towards Asken. So you see here on the screen a number of aspects that are worth pointing out. So we've got Fawnhurst Manor in the centre there, golf course to the south and to the east. We've got the woodland to the west. Site access is from Holme Lane, and then Doncaster Road to the west there. Then most of the Fear Factory development is in the woodland. You've got the two marquees, Fear Factory and Chasm. A number of other associated structures, named the Abandoned Church, Pogo Club, Log Cabin. And then finally the third marquee, which is the wedding venue, which is located on a lawned area just to the north of the main Fawnhurst Manor clubhouse buildings. Fear Factory itself, just to give a little explanation of it, it's an evening Halloween visitor attraction held for up to 2 weeks a year in October, culminating on the 31st of October. Visitors go through a series of inside scare mazes in the woodland and walk along woodland paths with actors hired to scare visitors. The attraction's been running for 5 years, although without planning consent, with various structures added over the course of that time. There's also been an unauthorised car park extension, formerly in part of the former woodland. Just briefly run through the proposed plans. Here we have the first marquee, Chasm, which is in the sort of southwest part of the woodland. Marquee 2, Fear Factory, located on the edge of an existing clearing in the woodland. And then there's various other assorted structures as well. The dimensions are listed in the officer report. So there's the Abandoned Church, Pogo Club and Log Cabin structures, as well as 6 shipping containers. And then also the car park extension, which is about 1,100 square metres, providing an extra 41 parking spaces. So the development proposes to use the existing and extended car park to accommodate visitors to the development, and the application is supported by an event management plan, which sets out how visitor arrival times will be staggered in 30-minute intervals, a maximum of 40 visitors per 30-minute slot, and tickets and parking spaces are to be booked online only to manage parking demand, and visitors can stay for up to 2 hours once inside. And then there's the wedding venue marquee as well on the lawn area. So So just to give you a few photos of the application site, here we have the existing car park and the entrance to the Fear Factory attraction from the car park itself. Got the site access at the north from Holme Lane. This is established. On the right there, we've got the landscaped area to the north of the Fawnhurst Manor buildings, and you can just see the wedding marquee there as well. Here we have two photos of the areas of cleared woodland in the north of the site for the car park extension. These show the first two of the marquees for the Fear Factory. On the left is the marquee actually named Fear Factory. It's canvas and scaffolding with cladding on the outside. And then likewise the Chasm marquee, also canvas and scaffolding with, in this case, metal sheeting cladding to the front elevation. Moving on, we've got an abandoned church maze structure. Likewise, this is scaffolding with cladding attached. A pogo club, a structure, similar materials. And then we've got a log cabin structure, that's the front and rear. And then a ticket office container in a small clearing just off the car park, and other structures in the larger clearing within the woodland as well. It's worth noting the clearing where the Fear Factory structures are and the ticket office were existing clearings. It's just the car park extension which is new. So the main considerations of the planning application are considered to be green belt, landscape and visual impact, impact on ecology and trees, highways and parking to do with event management, and economic and cultural benefits brought from the development. So first of all, the green belt. So the site lies wholly within the Doncaster green belt. The local plan defers to the national planning policy framework when assessing applications for development in the green belt. Key policies include paragraph 142, which talks about the essential characteristics of green belt being their openness and their permanence. Inappropriate development is by definition harmful to the green belt and should not be approved except in very special circumstances. There are a number of exceptions in national policy to where development might not be considered inappropriate, but the development does not qualify for any of these, and so it would be considered inappropriate development. This means that it does harm the openness of the green belt. Harm can be both visual and spatial. Visually, the Fear Factory structures can be seen from Doncaster Road when the tree foliage is reduced in winter months. And spatially as well, as the development creates an additional 1,465 square metres of floor space in an area where that previously was not present. All of this means that very special circumstances must exist to override any identified harms. So as well as harm to the green belt, we need to consider what other harms there are. And in this case, these have been identified to be to ecology and trees at the site. So the woodland to the west of the Fawnhurst Manor main building is a designated local wildlife site, 7.14 16-acre plantation, and it also contains a priority habitat, deciduous woodland. The site also lies within a 500-metre protection buffer zone of ancient semi-natural woodland, Alston Wood, to the east. A full tree survey and preliminary ecological appraisal have been submitted in support of the application, which has enabled the assessment of the impact of the development on these ecological assets. Objections have been received from the Forestry Commission, Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, and the Council's tree and ecology officers. on the grounds of harm to the woodland, local wildlife site and priority habitat. Now, ordinarily, trees and ecology might be considered as slightly separate issues in planning, but in this case, because the ecological value of the woodland is so intrinsically connected to the health of the woodland, I'll be discussing them jointly here. So, first of all, if we consider the impact of the development on trees, Local Plan Policy 32 requires development to adequately consider trees and woodland during the design process so that a significant adverse impact upon public amenity or ecological interest can be avoided. Proposals should avoid the loss or deterioration of woodland. Now, whilst the Fear Factory development has largely utilised an existing clearing and paths within the woodland, there has been a significant amount of tree felling in the north of the woodland to create the unauthorised car park extension. So aerial images on the screen here show the area lost over the course of the past 14 years. And the majority of this clearance has taken place in the last 5 years. And in addition to the felling of trees, the submitted tree survey also deals how the Fear Factory development itself has harmed trees at the site, including some to beyond the point of saving. So, for example, a tree adjacent to the Fear Factory clearing was found as unsuitable for retention because soil had been piled against the tree and scraped within the rooting area with possible root severing. The tree survey notes significant concern that the tree may fail at any point under wind loading, and so it recommends that the tree be removed as soon as possible with restricted access to the target zone, which is the area the tree might fall over in the meantime. And there are other examples which show very poor practice around existing trees. So, for example, the log cabin structure has been built around this tree on the left, completely covering its root zone and with the floorboards and roof wrapped around the tree stem. The tree most likely doesn't receive enough water because the structure is covering its root area. And there is an unknown foam on the trunk. The floorboards and roof will also prevent the tree's growth. The tree surveys recommended that an irrigation channel be created to deliver the water to the tree, although that measure has been queried by the tree officer in terms of its suitability. And then in other cases, structures have been erected right up to the stems of the trees, such as the Fear Factory marquee structure on the right-hand side there. Again, this will impede the root area and has compacted soils around the stem. Further details can be found at paragraphs 8.28 to 33 of the officer's report. In terms of potential mitigation measures, the applicant's tree consultant has recommended a number of measures to attempt to address the harm caused. These include decompaction of soils and removal of existing hard standing around tree roots, plus soil improvement measures, creation of new paths for the marquee areas to try and divert footfall away from the root protection areas, resurfacing of newly designed pathways, temporary ground protection during soil improvement works, and tree-specific measures such as the irrigation channel already mentioned. Some of these measures have already started, as shown in the pictures here, with others still to be implemented. And whilst these measures will go some way to addressing the harm, it's important to note that they would not reverse all of it, and that the tree survey submitted recognises that some trees may be beyond saving. And if in these cases, if the development is allowed to remain, then these trees will require removing in order to avoid being a danger to visitors to the woodland. And these are measures which would not be necessary in an undeveloped and well-managed natural woodland. Part of the cleared woodland is also proposed for replanting as a biodiversity enhancement area, and whilst this measure is supported, it should be noted that any replacement woodland would take a significant period of time, perhaps 30 years or more, to re-establish and become an ecologically functioning woodland. And then if we move on to ecology, so local plan policies 26, 29 and 30 seek to protect and support ecological assets and biodiversity. As previously mentioned, much of the ecological interest of the site is intrinsic to the health of the woodland. The Yorkshire Wildlife Trust have objected to the development, emphasising the great significance of local wildlife sites as core wildlife-rich habitats with a critical conservation value. Likewise, the Council's ecologist has also objected. The ecological reports submitted in support of the application provide a comprehensive assessment of the impact of the development to priority habitats and species. It found suitable habitats for breeding birds, hedgehogs, bats, badgers, reptiles and terrestrial amphibians within the site, and recommends a number of mitigation measures which the Council's ecologist has confirmed as suitable, and should the development be approved would be subject to conditions. However, overall, it remains clear that the development has had a significant adverse impact on the local wildlife site and the priority habitat, and its retention would continue to have a detrimental impact on the woodland habitat. The Ecology Officer, in addition to his objection, has recommended that all unauthorised structures should be removed from the woodland, along with the current leisure activities, in order to allow natural dynamic processes to take over and rebuild ecosystems. And likewise, the car park extension hard standing should be removed and restored. The scheme will deliver just over 12% of biodiversity net gain, which does accord with policy 30 of the local plan. This will be delivered off-site, most likely in another area of the Fawnhurst Manor grounds, and part of the restored hard standing for the car park extension. Should the application be approved, this would be secured via a Section 106 legal agreement. However, it's important to note that whilst the delivery of minimum 10% biodiversity net gain is a benefit, it doesn't compensate for the other harms identified, being just one of the requirements of policy 30. And so overall, the development is still contrary to local plan policy 30. Just to mention a few other material considerations. I've briefly mentioned landscape and visual impact. This primarily ties up with the impact on landscape in the Greenbelt and is connected to the views that are visible from Doncaster Road of the development. Highway safety and parking. There was an initial objection from the Council's Highways Officer as there were concerns about the event management plan and how visitor trips could be controlled. An updated event management plan was submitted and the Highways Officer has removed his objection. The event management plan contains various details which are set out in full in the Officer report, which could be conditioned should the application be approved. Flood risk. The site is in flood zone 2, but the Council's Policy Officer is satisfied in that respect and there are no objections. There are no nearby neighbours and therefore no amenity concerns from the development. And finally, economic and cultural benefits. And I'll discuss these in the context of whether there are any very special circumstances that outweigh the other harms identified from the application. So the applicant has set out a number of reasons which they consider amount to very special circumstances. The full list is available in the committee report. However, there are only 3 which have the potential to be considered as very special circumstances. So the first is revenue for conservation. The applicant has pledged to contribute 5p per ticket sale to go towards preserving the woodland and to fund local conservation projects. It's worth reading this in the context that each ticket it costs up to £45, and so 5p seems a very minimal contribution for this, and so this is attributed limited weight. Secondly, positive economic impact to do with job creation, tourism and supporting an existing business. And this is detailed in full at paragraphs 8.80 to 85 and 9.6 and 9.7 of the Officer report. But just to give a brief overview, the Fear Factory development creates approximately 80 part-time jobs at the time of year of the event, so in October, plus 5 members of staff to manage traffic on days when the event is running. So that's approximately 80 part-time seasonal jobs. And then the wedding venue element of the development also creates an extra 3 jobs on wedding days. The development does attract a significant amount of tourism to the borough. The developer has put forwards a visitor survey which supports this, and Business Doncaster are also supportive of the development in this respect. The Fear Factory, the revenue from the Fear Factory does also support an existing business, and the tourism, the visitors coming in to visit the attraction would also spend money on other shops, accommodation, services in the borough as well. It is acknowledged that these are material benefits that do weigh in favour of the application. However, it's worth noting that these benefits are largely limited to just 2 weeks of the year, and as such, we consider they should only be attributed modest positive weight. And then finally, cultural and social value. It is a family-friendly and accessible event, and the event has been the receipt of several awards and award nominations, and limited weight can be given to this as well. So moving on, in fact, no, just going back. Overall, although these factors are considered to be material benefits for the application, they do not amount to the quite high test of what should be considered as very special circumstances to outweigh the harms. So to conclude, the development is inappropriate development within the green belt, and no very special circumstances exist to outweigh the harms identified. These harms are to a designated local wildlife site and a priority habitat in a woodland that lies within the protection buffer zone of an ancient woodland. And these harms are not outweighed by the economic, social and cultural benefits brought by the scheme, which are limited, being for only 2 weeks of the year, compared to the harms of the development, which are permanent and all year round. It's worth just mentioning here as well any fallback options for the developer. The wedding venue element of the development has the potential to benefit from permitted development rights if it were a temporary structure. That would mean taking it down once its use has been finished. At present, it's retained the whole year round. The Fear Factory element doesn't have the potential to benefit from permitted development rights due to restrictions within those development rights as to curtilage operations and the use of land. So to conclude, the recommendation to the committee is to refuse for the reasons that are set out in the report. So that's inappropriate development in the greenbelt with no very special circumstances demonstrated, harm to ecological assets and to trees and woodland. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Susie. We've now got Councillor Thomas Noon, the ward member for Norton and Asken, who has requested to speak on the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the large red button when you want to speak, and again when you want to mute your microphone, and we'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Good afternoon, committee. The Fear Factory has been going for 5 years without any complaints. The application has some 181 supporters and 6 consultee supporters. This change of use over the last 5 years has seen significant growth that has seen it become a thriving tourist attraction in the north of Doncaster, an area that has been overlooked for investment for the last 25 years. The north needs investment and forward thinkers like the applicant to provide growth and jobs. 30 to 40 years ago, the site was fields. Since then, the current owner has pumped millions into the estate and planted over 15,000 trees, which line the beautiful golf course that they have created. I went for a site visit last week. It is very well maintained and managed, and looks like a couple of treehouse buildings that over time will grow even more into the landscape and become camouflaged by the natural beauty. I believe they're not an eyesore due to the fact that they can't be seen from outside the woods. They have been strategically placed not to harm the trees but to become part of the land. The natural clearing on the site, where some of the buildings are already, has the maintenance shed for the golf course. This was erected years ago in Greenbelt because it's a necessity. It adds to the site that the owner created. We are actively trying to stop growth and I don't understand why. I'm no expert in trees, don't get me wrong, but the owner has already agreed to the biodiversity net gain increase, and judging by his previous ventures, this will happen. It already has. When they decided to plant 15,000 trees 30 years ago, before net gain was even a thing. I see our city when walking around the city centre and stuff like that, and we've got trees that are surrounded by tarmac. Yet the council are trying to stop this. It's red tape gone mad. The company needs this, and the people of Doncaster need this, and I fully support the change of use. It will be used 2 weeks of the year, and us as councillors are elected to speak on behalf of our constituents. It's about time the council started to listen to the people. 5.11 in the report are concerned with building a strong, competitive economy. Paragraph 85 requires planning decisions to help create the conditions which support business, in which businesses can invest, expand and adapt. Significant weight should be placed on the need to support local economic growth and productivity, taking into account local business needs and wider opportunities for development. Paragraph 88 states that planning decisions should enable the sustainable growth and expansion of all types of business in rural areas, as well as sustainable rural tourism and leisure development, which respect the character of the countryside. 8.84. It is clear that the event provides income not only for the applicant's business, but also for other businesses in the locality in the north, including hotels, restaurants and shops. As visitors, people will stay overnight and spend their money on hospitality and other services. This is further supported by the representations made by Business Doncaster. This is given a moderate positive weight, noting the wider economic benefits for the locality and tourism within the borough, but also the short period in which the benefits occur. It is only 2 weeks of the year. As a council, we've recently sold Rose Hill site and
1 minute remaining.
and ancient woodland to allow houses to be built on a greenfield site. The mitigation was we planted trees elsewhere. As a council, we look hypocritical to sell off our own land for it to be built on, destroying natural beauty, but want to refuse this application. I don't understand the council's stance on this. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Noon. Do any committee members wish to ask a question? No? Okay, thank you for that. We've now got Miss Emma Rich, member of the public, has requested to speak in support of the application. If you'd like to make your way. Yeah, if you'd like to come down to the front. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the large red button when you're ready to speak and press again to mute the microphone when you've completed, and we'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Good afternoon. I would like to start by thanking you for the opportunity to speak today in support of a planning application lodged by Doncaster Fear Factory. I personally have had the pleasure of previous employment at Doncaster Fear Factory as operations manager. Firstly, I would like to outline some of the benefits that Doncaster Fear Factory currently bring to the City of Doncaster and would continue to bring should the planning application be successful. Employment. We have created hundreds of seasonal positions for admin, maintenance, operations and of course cast members, drawing mainly from Doncaster's satellite villages of Armthorpe, Balby Hexthorpe, Hatfield, Bentley, Norton Asken and Carcroft, many more. In addition, we regularly attract staff from Sheffield, Huddersfield, Leeds, Mansfield and Nottingham, thus indicating that this very popular event is successfully reaching out to budding actors, technicians in the event and entertainment industry, not just from Doncaster, but further afield too. As an employer, Doncaster Fear Factory also very much supports equal opportunities, employing many people with autism, mental health issues and physical disabilities. Many of these actors have often said how different they feel within themselves working with Doncaster Fear Factory and how much of a benefit it has been for them all, noticing a great increase in general mood, happiness and home life. We are also very proud of the accessibility we offer. 4 of our 7 attractions are fully accessible for people with disabilities, including wheelchair access, which is something not commonly seen in the industry. This year alone, over 300 guests, used these accessibility features, and many expressed their gratitude, as it has allowed them to experience something they would never otherwise have been able to. Creative Arts and Doncaster Council's Culture Strategy 2030, which was released January 2023, quotes, "It makes a big contribution to the economy in terms of participation, tourism, and in the business and investment it can attract. Culture also offers a wide range of rewarding jobs and careers, and we want to make more of that and improve accessibility to these, not just for our young people, but for residents of all ages." Tourism. This year alone, ticket sales breakdown showed that visitors to the attraction came from as far as New Zealand, USA, Belgium, Germany, Ireland, Wales, Scotland, and in addition, visitors came in large numbers from all corners of England. This attraction now has an excellent reputation worldwide within its particular genre, and without a doubt, some of these event guests will inevitably be using Doncaster's accommodation provisions, combining their visit to the area with other attractions we offer as a city. Health benefits. Doncaster Fear Factory is aware of the Council's Get Doncaster Moving initiative. Families, couples, elder and younger generations all walk or run through the gates of the scare park. Quite possibly, this is the first time some visitors have been to an attraction in a natural woodland setting. Being out in nature and seeing wildlife, as well as enjoying the attractions and experiences that Doncaster Fear Factory provide, is beneficial to both physical and mental well-being of the visitors. To illustrate this, the average step count per day in the UK is between 4,912 and 5,340. Within the space of a guest's 2-hour time slot inside the park, they will have done, on average, 4,122 steps. The people of Doncaster and surrounding areas are enjoying a fun activity and achieving the average daily step count in just 2 hours. The issue of Greenbelt.
1 minute remaining.
Whilst we understand the utmost importance of preventing urban sprawling and protecting our green areas and wildlife, we would also like to understand why planning and use of land for 0.362 acres, that's just 0.0005% of the Yorkshire and Humberside's Greenbelt, would be denied, when 121 Miller homes covering 17 acres in a Greenbelt area of Doncaster would be granted permission. In comparison, the application for Doncaster Fear Factory received minimal objections and over 180 supporters. The application for the Miller homes saw multiple objectors and appeared on TV when BBC News covered a protest on the site. It would be a very sad day if Doncaster was to lose one of its most popular and award-winning attractions, currently benefiting many facets of the Doncaster economy and providing enjoyment to both a domestic and international clientele.
Thank you for that. Your time's now up.
Thank you.
Do any of the committee wish to ask Mr Rich any questions? Councillor Stapleton?
Thank you. Just one very brief question. We know the event lasts for 2 weeks.
Yes.
The employment, I'm assuming, it's not a case of turn up on the morning of the event and they're employed just for 2 weeks. I'm assuming it's time before maybe so happen. Can you give me an indication the length of employment? And I know it might not be the same for everybody, but can you give me an indication of when the first employee is taken on and so when it ends?
So there are multiple positions all year round. So you have the groundskeepers that would naturally work on the golf course as well. They would be within the woodland, obviously, looking after that site as well. And then you have positions that would start in March for the planning of change of any attractions, marketing. They would start from March until October, and then obviously you have cast, team leaders, show captains that would begin the planning. We're looking at July, August until the end of October.
Okay, thank you very much.
We've got Councillor Cox and Councillor Beach.
It's an easy one. How many trees have you planted? Or have been planted to replace what's been taken out?
That's a question for Laurie.
Yeah, Councillor Cox, this is a member of the public, so if you save those for the applicant and the agent, then you'll be able to ask those questions. Like I say, we'll be able to get that clarification. She's speaking as a member of the public in support of the application.
Sorry.
Councillor Beach?
Yes, thank you. You made much of the fact that this is only on for a couple of weeks and ends at the Halloween, 31st of October. So therefore, I want to know why, as of this morning, there's still faces painted looking like pumpkins, lots of flags and other paraphernalia still on site.
Councillor Beach? Again, she's speaking in favour as a member of the public.
Okay.
So if you
I'll
save
ask-
it for the
yeah.
applicant or agent. Do we have any other questions? Okay, thank you very much for your time. We've got Mr. Laurie Murray, who is the applicant, and Shane Marsh, who is the agent, wanting to speak in support of the application. If you'd like to come down to the front, please. We're going to be starting first with Mr. Shane Marsh, who is the agent. So you've got 2.5 minutes. We will be, when you're ready, if you press the large red button, that will then make sure that you're recorded, and I'll let you know when you've got about 1 minute remaining.
Okay, thank you, Chair. When considering whether to agree or not with the Planning Officer's recommendation for refusal, I would ask you to consider the following mitigating points. Firstly, as people have already mentioned, the limited duration of the event in question for only 2 weeks each year, which means the woodland is left undisturbed for the remaining 11.5 months. This limited use can be conditioned and closely monitored by the local authority to ensure compliance, which minimises any potential harm to the woodland during these 2 weeks of activity. Secondly, various mitigation measures can be implemented to further reduce potential damage to the woodland. These measures can also be conditioned and monitored by the local authority. By utilising historic paths, the event avoids disrupting sensitive habitats, therefore helping to preserve the natural environment. Thirdly, the economic benefits of the Fear Factory cannot be overstated here. This event generates substantial revenue for not only the hosting business, but also for other local businesses in the vicinity. The cultural and social value of this event is equally significant. The Fear Factory has placed Doncaster on the map, earning nationally recognised awards and nominations over the past few years, and it's a source of pride and a notable attraction for the community. I ask you to consider these material benefits, which can be conditioned and monitored by the local authority. Thank you. As an alternative to the fallback position, it's important to note that the LPA may have misdirected themselves in law regarding the relevant test and material considerations in determining the definition of curtilage. By doing so, they have removed the applicant's permitted development rights, which allow for the erection of temporary structures up to 28 days. The meaning of curtilage in law is a complex and nuanced issue, but there is case law that measures and tests the definition of curtilage, and it's deemed to be part and parcel. In this case, the woodland is not within the curtilage of the building, it's not directly associated with the clubhouse or close proximity, being separated by a car park some 75 metres away. the woodlands not ancillary to the enjoyment of the clubhouse or vice versa. The test is not whether the building lands falls within the single ownership
Thank you.
or application
That's
site.
your time now. Apologies, but that's your time now. So we're going to move on to Mr. Laurie Murray, and we will let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining. If you'd like to press the large red button just to turn your microphone off, please, for me. Yeah? Okay, and if you press the large red button, that's great. And I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. Thornhurst Manor has been part of my life for as long as I can remember, and I started working at our family business when I was just 15 years old. And over the past decade, I've taken on more responsibilities in running and developing the business. My father built Thornhurst Manor in 1993, and since then it has been a cornerstone of our family. We believe the Doncaster community. However, the hospitality sector is under immense pressure, rising costs from food and drinks to wages, and have made it increasingly difficult to maintain profitability. The last budget announcement, which includes increased staffing costs and NI contributions, is a serious concern. Frankly, it could be the final nail in our coffin. Compounding these challenges, last year's harsher winter forced the closure of our golf course for up to 6 months. This resulted in significant losses, yet we chose to retain our 7 groundsmen. Looking to the future, we want to keep growing. We've been working hard to develop our Fear Factory attraction. Within the next 2 years, we expect to create 4 new full-time positions specifically for this event and 25 more seasonal jobs. These will be fresh opportunities for local talent and another way we can contribute to the economy. Once working away, I realised that the hobby I created at just 16, creating a Halloween event in my back garden in Skellow, was something that Doncaster could really benefit from, and I decided to take that idea and move it to Thornhurst Manor, where we could create a more suitable and permanent location for the event. When we moved to Thornhurst Manor in 2017, I never imagined that this small idea would grow into what it is today, and at the heart of this event, my intentions were never to avoid
If you want to turn your microphone off and pause for a minute while you get a drink of water.
How long does he have left, Chair?
Right. As the agent, would you be happy to continue to read it for him? Yeah? We'll reset the time, and if you put the microphone on when you're ready to start. So you've got 2 minutes and 19 seconds left.
I'll continue for the applicant. When we moved to Thornhurst in 2017, I never imagined that this small idea would grow into what it is today. At the heart of this event, my intentions were never to avoid planning regulations, nor it to turn into a massive money-making venture. My simple goal was to create a Halloween event that would entertain people and bring a unique experience to Doncaster. And while the event has grown into something much bigger than I imagined, it is the people of Doncaster and South Yorkshire who have made it what it is today. Now we find ourselves in a position where we attract thousands of visitors to Doncaster, bringing attention and business to our city, something I am incredibly proud of. At 25, I never thought I would be standing before you speaking about Fear Factory in this way, especially not my 16-year-old self. Doncaster Fear Factory isn't just a business. It's a hobby that has grown into something much bigger. I believe that's part of the reason it's been so successful, even winning industry awards and competing with major events like Alton Towers, York Mazes, and finalists of the Yorkshire Tourism Awards. Beyond tourism, Thornhurst Manor employs nearly 40 people year-round across our restaurant, golf course and events. During our temporary events, such as weddings and large gatherings, that number can swell to nearly 180, including 120 performing roles, many of which...
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Are filled by local students from colleges, universities and amateur dramatic groups around Doncaster. These jobs aren't just modest contributions that the planners would deem them. They are vital to the livelihoods of families across Doncaster and the surrounding areas. When I chose this site, it was because of the woodland. It's what makes the event what it is. Without it, we wouldn't have the atmosphere that has made Doncaster Fear Factory so special. My team and I are fully committed to conserving the woodland. We have developed a detailed mitigation plan to restore and protect the environment, and we are dedicated to planting hundreds of new trees, diversifying the species, and continuing to support the local wildlife and habitats. Additionally,
Thank you. That's your time that's allocated. If you'd like to press the large red button again, I'll turn your microphone off. Committee members, do you have any questions that you would like to add? We'll start with Councillor Stapleton, then Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to go back to what you were saying earlier about the curtilage. And I know myself that is a very difficult, sometimes quite awkward, especially when you're looking at residential and commercial. It was something I picked up when I was reading this last night, that there does appear to be a footpath that separates the Thornhurst Manor and the site. And I can see where it goes. And I was intrigued to sort of say, well, hang on a minute, he's outside the curtilage because of that footpath. That was my sort of understanding of it. And the question is coming, Chair. If that is the case, and we end up in a situation where you're using permitted rights, what would the damage be ongoing? Because I would consider, because if you're having to pull it down and put it back up every year, there'd probably be more damage being caused in the future than what has been up to now.
Thank you for that question. Yeah, the definition of curtilage is a key factor in this application, and it must be determined fairly, I believe. There are measures and tests for what is curtilage, what isn't. And it's more than just being part of the application site or under the same ownership. There are reasonable grounds to suggest that the definition of curtilage has been wrongly applied here. We believe that the applicant has got a fallback position for not only the wedding marquee but also the woodland. We argue that this application should be allowed as it's preferable to what could be developed under permitted development, which is essentially erecting temporary structures and dismantling them within 28 days every year. The disturbance and loss to trees, ecology, wildlife would be much more dramatic than leaving the structures in place for them to settle, let the woodland grow around them. And that's what they're doing now.
Thank you for that. No further questions, Chair.
Thank you for that. Councillor Cox?
I think you answered it in your representation with hundreds of trees, but have you planted those trees already, or is it ongoing?
No, yeah, it will be part of the plan moving forward and the net gain.
Councillor Hogarth?
Yeah, on, like I said, page 23 regarding trees, it says it is believed that no felling licence has been given. Have you got a felling licence for the trees that you've took down?
Not that I believe so, no.
I don't know, can you apply retrospectively or the tree officer?
Councillor Hogarth, if we go on to, when we put two questions to the officer and they can verify that for you. Do you have another question or can I move to Councillor Beach? All right, Councillor Beach.
Thank you. I think you probably heard what I asked. Why, when this Fear Factory is supposed to be there a couple of weeks and certainly ending, given a few days to clear it up, why, as of this morning, we can still see faces of pumpkins on trees, flags flying, and I have had many comments that it is very distracting driving down the A19 and I do concur with that since I drive down there quite often. People tend to think they're driving along and it isn't quite a very straight road and it's only 2 lanes and it's, oh, what's that? And people do look aside, and I want to know why. We are now 30 days since it should have been closed, and it's still got all this, some of this paraphernalia there.
Councillor Beach, it's not really relevant to the application because we're actually looking at a retrospective application.
Except
so
that it is, part of it is distracting, and I've had several
comments. I fully
comments.
appreciate that there's still, but it's not really applicable to this application.
Okay.
So do we have any other questions? Councillor Mounce.
Thank you, Chair. To Laurie, to the agent there. Several awards and award nominations are. Can you tell me what some of these nominations are? Because they sound good. But
Yes, so we've been nominated in the industry for Best Set Design, Best Attraction, Scariest Attraction, and then just last week we were nominated as the finalist for the Best Event of the Year for the Yorkshire Tourism Awards.
further questions, yeah. It mentions in this document here about numbers of people using the facility. I think my colleague Mr. Doe mentioned the fact there. How many numbers of support have we got from, like, within Doncaster city itself, the borough of Doncaster city borough? And also, how many outside people come and visit this? Are these figures correct? How many figures would you say, what is the number that use of that facility, that fortnight it's open?
Sorry, was that for numbers of how many inside the borough of the representations, or just I wouldn't know that information of where the representations came from?
So what's have an idea? How many people will visit that site when it's open every 2 weeks in September?
I think what Councillor Mount is asking is how many you have attending the events activities during that time that it's open.
Ah, okay. This year I wouldn't have the exact, but we were at the max each night, which was 300 per person, 300 per night. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Laurie.
Over to my Vice Chair for a question.
Hi, I was just wondering, when it comes to the wedding venue, is that during the summer only, or does that go through to the winter season as well?
It does go through to the winter season. However, with the licensing, we are capped at 15 events in the marquee a year. So even though we are obviously applying for it to be up full time, we can only have so many events in that marquee.
Do we have any other questions? Councillor Mount, are you wanting to ask a question? Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for that. We're now going to ask committee members, we're going to go into debate. So any comments or questions to officers? And I've also got Councillor Stapleton already eager there waiting.
As usual, Chair, thank you. I spent a couple of hours on reading this last night, and I've been going through it again this morning when I've had a bit of time. There's a lot I could say, but I'm going to try and keep it as short as I can. When it comes to Fear Factory, this is the biggest fear that Fear Factory produces. This. The fact that we're even sitting here with this is, to me, is out of order. And give you an idea of why it's creating fear unnecessarily. We saw a picture of a tree with a bit of foam around it and there's a building on it. You didn't mention, because it's in the report, that that's a C2 category low quality tree. There's not enough, before you answer, there's not enough, there's too much has been made of basic simple facts. Now, if this was a application prior to the work, I'd probably be more inclined to go along with what a lot of the Doncaster Council is saying. It's retrospective. I actually get to the point where I believe it may actually, court law can prove it, but it feels very vindictive. We've got a young man who started a project when he was 18, I think he was 18, who has built something that is absolutely brilliant for Doncaster. And I think it's full of contradictions about things we've done in the past in Doncaster. And I, for one, am not going to support Doncaster Council's refusal of this. I just don't see there's grounds of it. So, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Cox and Councillor Beach.
Thank you. I agree with Gary. And partly, I mean, I know we're not supposed to talk about other applications in other areas, but it does seem very much like the application that we had in last time. It is in Greenbelt. It is a business. It needs to go. It needs to grow. Keep going. Keep growing. Employ more people. We shouldn't be stepping on people because they're trying to do something good. Yeah, there's some trees, granted, but it's planting trees. There's conditions on there that would help this move forward. So, I mean, I move that we give them the permissions that they need with the conditions that are in there.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hutz. Before I ask anybody to second that proposal, I'm just going to go through because we've got Councillor Hogarth and we've got Councillor Beach that want to speak as well. So, Councillor Hogarth.
Yeah, from the tree regarding, has some felling taken place? No felling licence has been given. Has anybody applied for a felling licence?
Yeah, the felling licence is actually undertaken by the Forestry Commission. It's something that they would normally ask for a felling licence through them. I know that the Forestry Commission have actually objected to this application, and I don't believe they've had a felling licence for that, although you would need to speak directly to the Forestry Commission in order to get the exact information. You did ask if you could actually get a retrospective one, so I actually went online very quickly, and looking at the information I've been able to find, it did confirm that no, you can't actually get a retrospective felling licence from the Forestry Commission once the trees have been felled. If there was a requirement for a felling licence and they haven't applied for it, then they've fallen foul of the legislation, and the Forestry Commission could, if they chose to, go to them under the Forestry Act, which they actually administer. It wouldn't be Doncaster Council that would look at any felling licence applications, or indeed, if anything were to occur that should have required a felling licence, again, it would be the Forestry Commission that would look at that, not Doncaster Council, because they administer that legislation. Does that help?
Yeah. On a further point, is there any consequences of the damage that's been caused to trees, the removal of them, damage?
Thank you, Chair. From an ecological perspective, there is damage to the site, and that's why sensitive sites such as this, which is a local wildlife site, are protected through policy. You'd have to spend quite a lot of time to actually find out exactly how much damage has been caused. But from a visual perspective, with me walking around the site, I can see there has been damage caused. Such as when you may say that existing paths are being used, but then these paths have become wider and they're sort of covered in surfacing, which is not a woodland characteristic. So yes, there is damage there, but you could also say that over a period of time, what damage could have been evident, say 5 years ago, is a little more sort of blended in with the woodland environment. But nevertheless, trees have been removed, vegetation has been removed, and the wet woodland characteristic will have been disturbed.
Councillor Beach.
Yes, I don't know who will want to answer, but it's biodiversity again. It says in the report it's 12.04%, which is slightly above what we should have of 10%. What I want to know is, was this calculated before the trees were taken down or after? Because it would make a great deal of difference to the percentage required in the fact that we saw a lot of has been removed for car parking. So I want to know whether this is going to cover, if the figures before the trees were taken out or after. Do we know? Thank you.
Yes, it would be after, because there is a cut-off date of 22nd of January 2020, and most of the trees that were taken out prior to that time, and therefore they would not be able to be counted in the baseline. So the baseline is counted as things are at the moment.
I've got Councillor Mousey, then Councillor Stapleton.
There is an issue about trees, but Chair, I have a dilemma here. When you look at the mix of objections and those that have been took back out, it's a complete mix and mismatch because they're all saying the other. There's no sort of one factor that dictates whether we go for this or we vote against it. I think on this one. And because I have a dilemma, I understand, Lloyd, what you're saying, and well done what you're trying to do so far. But to me, Chair, I would like to move that we get out there and have a site visit ASAP. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Stapleton.
Thank you, Chair. Question for Martin. Everybody seems to be fixated on trees. I don't know why, but we'll keep with that theme. So you mentioned a few times there about the number of trees felled. Can you evidence how many trees were felled?
No, I can't evidence how many trees were felled. I have to say that on my site visits, I will say that the layout and the positioning of the buildings may well have avoided trees. I can't say that for certain, but but that may well have been the case. And there are trees that you can, stumps that you can actually see have been removed. But on the other hand, you can also say that trees that are subject to very close development, such as structures, which are right next to them, will actually suffer, and so whilst they've not been taken out, they may, what's happening to them at the moment is detrimental to the sort of future health of the tree.
Okay, thank you. So just to go over that, just precis what you're saying is there's no evidence that trees have been taken out. There are some stumps there, but they may well have been from when Thornhurst Manor was built or the golf club was. You've seen that there are some structures that are placed around the trees, and you mentioned one that's quite close, which isn't actually brick, even though the photograph makes it look like it's a brick wall. It's not, it's a fake wall. Again, it just feels like more scaremongering using trees. And overall, whilst they accept the potential harm that may have been caused, I'm just looking at this. We've got a young man here who is very evident willing to work with Doncaster Council with mitigation to do this right. And we've all done things as young people that we regret doing in certain ways. And when somebody with a bit more experience comes along and says, "That's not the right way to do it, lad," hands up, yeah, okay, I've made a mistake, I'll do it. Now, I do think from a tree officer point of view, we've got no evidence whatsoever. Tree felling is not relevant. We shouldn't even be discussing it because licenses are not issued by Doncaster Council, so that's not relevant to this as far as I'm concerned. We do need to be looking at tree felling in the future because the potential will be some that will need to come down, and I understand that. But I think I'd rather see, as a council, that we work with this young man to help get his dream over the line and make it better, rather than bringing this into here and just creating more fear and having him crying. I've never seen a member of the public so upset in here like that. And that alone, I'm disgusted at. So, thank you very much for your information. I'm not going to be supporting it. I'll be supporting the motion from Councillor Cox, and I'll second it.
Emma?
Thank you. Just to kind of wrap up what I've heard so far in the debate, councillors obviously understand that this is a greenbelt site. Finding very special circumstances is a high bar to meet. Those very special circumstances have to clearly outweigh any of the harms that have been identified, and we've discussed those and what weight you're giving to those harms as we've just spoken about. It's also each case on its own merits. It may be that a set of circumstances in one particular case amount to very special circumstances where they might not in another, and that depends on the harms that are arising as much as anything else. please do be assured none of this is intended to be in any way vindictive, and we're really sorry that the applicant's had to come here today and speak to us and put his case forward. It's not an easy thing to do, so I do appreciate that. But what we've done is balance those harms that we've heard about today against the benefits that we've heard about, and that's why we've got the recommendation in front of you. That said, if the committee feels that those benefits do amount to very special circumstances, that they do clearly outweigh those harms that you've talked about, then that's reason enough to grant planning permission subject to detailed conditions. But that's ultimately the exercise that we're looking at here, and what's been happening through the course of the debate that I've heard so far.
Councillor Cox and Councillor Stapleton.
I think, yeah, what you said there. I mean, the conditions are that it's supplying a tourist venue that is very, very well attended. They've obviously said that they want to work with the authority. They don't want to cause any more damage. They want to work with everybody. And I mean, when I have never been, but from things that you can read on the council's websites of how good it is, and it's promoted by this authority. What are we saying to people outside? Are we saying, right, yeah, okay, you can come and do something in Doncaster, but hang on a minute. No, you can't. We want development. We want people to come in. We want Doncaster to succeed. And this is part of it, and they are willing to work with the authority. So, I mean, I move it again that we grant them the permissions.
Can I just add to what Emma was saying? I think what Emma's saying is the test we have to overcome is high. So I appreciate what you're saying about this is a tourist attraction, lots of people want to come. Very special, what I'm hearing is you are saying very special circumstances exist to outweigh the harms that have been identified in the officer's report and in the presentation. I think what we need from you is just elaboration on what it is that is very special about this development that outweighs all of that harm you talked about, and just a bit more meat on the bone so that we can put that in the decision.
Special circumstances, it's giving employment. It's getting people out into the environment and experiencing something not that's apparently being terrified, but also going out and being in the countryside. It's getting, we've said tourism, bringing people in to look what Doncaster has to offer. It's I mean, you could go on and on and on. Some of the benefits are already on the slides. That, you know, we need people to get off the bums and go out and walk. That can be pushed forward. There can be more made out of what's there. It might not necessarily take the way in the future, we don't know. But that's the business. So just at least give them a chance. And yes, I do firmly believe that there are reasons that it should be granted.
Before I fetch Councillor Stapleton, I just want to say this is very emotive because we've got a position where we've got ancient woodlands that needs to be protected. We've got work that's been done without permission that's been detrimental to that area. So it's how we actually get a balance between making sure that the ancient woodland is protected, that it goes back to its glory, but while supporting an initiative that's really popular, well thought out and needed, you know, and it's how we get that balance. So I actually believe that Councillor Mounsey has mentioned as having a site visit. I think for all of us to actually go and have a site visit, to actually have a look at the site, and then maybe look at how we can work with the applicant and the officers to make sure that depending on the outcome from that, what mitigations would definitely need to be put in place to make sure that the ancient woodlands is protected, and any future works or intended the growing of that industry is done in a correct and proper manner, so you're not in this situation. But I'm torn because it is an ancient woodland that does, and it has got habitat in there, but we've got somebody who's put something that feels passionately into the community that's really working, so how we get the balance to protect both. So that's my views. Councillor Stapleton.
Yeah, just to clarify, Chair, I don't believe it is ancient woodland. It's a buffer to ancient woodland, not ancient woodland itself. And I don't think there's any harm to the ancient woodlands. I think if that had been the case, the officer would have put that in the report. You know, there'd been X, Y, and Z damage to the ancient thing. And I think all the other agencies around would have been jumping up and down on this, and probably legal action, etc. I do understand, you're right, it is an emotive subject, but this is a woodland that, you know, as I said earlier, if Doncaster Council had dealt with this 5 years ago or 3 years ago when they're moving to Thornhurst Manor, I might be more inclined to follow what the officer said. But the fact it's been left so long with no action being taken, probably no guidance, it doesn't say anything about, oh, we tried to tell them, blah, 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 and they've ignored us or anything. There's nothing of that. It appears this seems to be a rather recent thing. You know, I believe it's about 18 months that the council have been involved in. And looking at, you know, special circumstances, we've got a tourist attraction that does attract huge amounts of people from the local area and obviously further afield has been evidence. But the overriding thing as well here that perhaps is being ignored, and it's more important than a blooming tree, is the simple fact that 170 odd people have supported it, 2 people have objected, and when you look at all the different organisations that have been consulted, the only ones that seem to object is about the trees. But then there's mitigating circumstances where every one of them has said, oh yes, if this is done, we'll be all right about it. You know, they're agreeing that yes, if this is done, we'll accept it. So the objection would be renewed. And I think, as Councillor Cox is saying, when you've got Visit Doncaster actively promoting this on their own website, and we've got the Yorkshire Tourist Board nominated for awards, I think that swings us much more into the specialist circumstances. And again, for me, I just think, you know, a young man of his age, 16, with an idea of, thought, you know, me and my mates will have a good time at the weekend. I mean, I remember when that first started, because I lived in Carcroft at the time, and I personally thought, what a stupid idea, I'm not interested, don't like. But that's just me personally. But look at where it's gone. It's grown from when it was in his back garden. Opposite, it was actually, if I remember rightly, opposite the petrol station. There was a thing on the right-hand side with a lake when it was in there. I remember it clearly. It's now grown because it's become so popular. And I do know there's people in this room that have been, and they've enjoyed every minute, and so have their families. And I think it'd be absolutely a travesty for us to go anywhere near knocking this back. I think we should take it on the chin that we've not acted in expedient time. It's been delayed for our own reason, whatever. But let's now be positive, move forward. Let's work with this young man. Let's get his dreams fulfilled. And I think we should go forward with it with the conditions that the council would like to see, so that it can be done and done properly. And that would mitigate any harm, potential harm moving forward. And I think there's your special circumstances, the people and the grit of Doncaster. Thank you.
Councillor Mounsey.
Thank you, Chair. I take on board what Councillor Gary said and Councillor Cox are saying. I also take vast interest in it. I know what Councillor Noon's got on it, was busy, but he outlined it fully there, what the situation is with this project. I still say again, Chair, these papers contradict each other in more ways than one. It's not just about trees. It's what I want to see face to face with that young man there taking us around to have a look at this site, and you get a better idea of what actually is happening down there. As far as I'm concerned at the minute, I have an open mind at the minute, but I want to see this site. When I've seen this site, and I think everybody should see this site, then I'll make my mind up because of what I've seen. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Muddiman.
Yeah, can I just say nobody's surprised that it's me that's visited multiple times. But can I second Councillor Mounsey's site visit, please? But can I also request that none of the character actors are there? Because I don't think some of the committee would cope with that.
Thank you for that. Is there anyone else wanting to make any comments? Okay, so at the moment we've got a proposal by the officer which is to refuse the planning application. We've had a proposal from Councillor Cox for us to grant permission, and we've got a proposal for a site visit. So, which one do you want me to take first then? Okay, so therefore, the officer's proposal is to refuse planning permission. Is that moved?
One problem with doing that first is you've then got 2 votes. Because if you vote to reject it and you lose, and then you'll go for a site visit. For a site visit.
It's lost.
Site visit is the only motion.
To me, you've got to do a site visit first for the practicalities of the result.
Yeah. If the motion for a site visit fails, then you fall back is the motion to pass on.
Would you let's take the legal advice for the correct way to do it. Want to make sure this is done properly. So, right, okay. They've stated they're happy for us to do the motion for the site visit first. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Therefore, it's been proposed by Councillor Munson and seconded by Councillor Emma Mudderman-Rawlings that we go for a site visit. Therefore, can we have a show of hands of those in favour to do a site visit? Can you please make sure you raise your hand so it can be seen? That is unanimous. Therefore, what we're going to do, we've agreed that we're going to do a site visit to make sure then we can make a better informed decision and clarify some points. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, we're going to go for a slight break. It is 15:21, so at 15:26, can we be back in the chamber, please? You've got 5 minutes exactly. Windsor Road and car parking for 24 vehicles, include provision of undercroft cycle store and bin provision within the rear parking, and Andrea Sudders is the planning officer that's presenting this item.
Thank you, Chair. I won't expand on that description. I think it's quite thorough. So I'll just go into pre-committee amendments. We've got a couple of speakers for this application. We've got a local resident, Julie McClatchy, speaking in opposition. And we've also got the agent, Neil Cook, who's speaking in support. There's also been one further representation received. It raises no additional issues of objection that's not already been covered within the committee report. So everything's covered in that respect. So looking at the site itself, this is an aerial view which gives you the best overall view of this site. It's located on the eastern side of Lakeside Boulevard. It's on the roundabout junction forming a ring road around the lake. The site's located on a prominent corner position of Lakeside Boulevard and Windscar Road. It's considered to be a gateway location on a main road leading to the city centre, and as such, there's been a great deal of thought given to the design of the scheme. It's currently an area of green space. It was formerly used as a construction site compound for the adjacent housing behind and to the side. The lake lies to the west side, and existing residential development lying immediately adjacent to the east and north. And then you've got Doncaster Leisure Parks located to the north, and then the mixed-use leisure and residential to the south. The general character of the area, you've got Lakeside Boulevard. It comprises of a number of tall apartment buildings on this road and in the immediate vicinity of the site, with apartment blocks immediately adjacent and opposite the site. There's 2-storey houses directly behind and on the opposite side of Windscar Road. And then this is just a close-up of the adjacent apartment block and the houses to the rear of the site. In policy terms and the principle of development, this site's designated as residential policy area within the local plan, so it's suitable in principle for residential use, subject to other policy considerations. There's been a number of objections received. These are set out in paragraph 6.2 of the officer report. The main objections are in relation to lack of sufficient parking on site, pressure for parking spaces on Lakeside Boulevard, the height and design of the building being out of character for the area, and impacts on amenity for existing residents due to loss of privacy, loss of light and overshadowing. These issues are all addressed and resolved with amended plans and submission of further details. In terms of consultee responses and comments, there's been one holding objection from the drainage officer. He's requested percolation tests. However, given this is a small site, it's within a large built-up residential area, so it's not unreasonable to require these details via condition. With respect to other consultees, no objections are raised. So looking at the site layout, the application's proposing a 4-storey building on the corner of Lakeside Boulevard and Winscar Road. It proposes 1, 2 and 3 bedroomed apartments. The design and layout, it's been given a lot of thought and consideration and how this will sit within the local context. This is on account of not only being a gateway location, but also in consideration of any adverse impacts on residential amenity for the existing residents. You can see the proposed vehicular access. This will be via Winscar Road. This has been agreed as the most suitable point of access by the highway officer. It's got parking located under the building and through to the parking court at the rear of the site. There's also cycle storage. This is also provided under the building. There have been objections raised on the lack of sufficient parking to accommodate future occupants and visitors. Policy requirement would be for 21 spaces for this apartment scheme. The car parking provision exceeds this and it provides 23 car parking spaces and 1 disabled space. There's also been objections regarding concerns of the increased volume of traffic and the impact of additional traffic generated from the development. Given the size of the development, there would be no requirement to provide a transport assessment. This only applies to developments over 50 units. The trip generation associated with 14 apartments isn't considered to be severe, and the local network is considered to have spare capacity to accommodate this growth. The layout does show a landscape feature to the front of the site and planting on Winscar Road. The realignment of the cycleway is needed to accommodate a safe pedestrian crossing point. The highway officers are satisfied with the scheme in terms of parking provision and the traffic volume. In terms of residential amenity, the nearest residents are numbers 11 and 15 Winscar Road. These are at the rear of the site, which you can see on this plan. Transitional developer guidance gives minimum separation distances, stating that 4-storey properties should have back-to-back distances of no less than 27 metres. The development achieves this with separation distances between these properties and the proposed building being 28 and 30.2 metres. So looking at the existing apartment block, there are existing windows on the apartment block that will face towards the gable elevation of the proposed building. These windows are obscure glazed and they serve non-habitable rooms. So these will face a blank gable elevation, therefore they're not considered to adversely impact on those residents. So looking at the front and rear elevations of the building and the scale of the building, the scale and massing of this building considered its immediate surroundings. So it proposes a 4-storey height building adjacent to the existing apartment block on Lakeside Boulevard, and then it steps down to 3 storeys as the building turns onto Winscar Road, respecting the height of the existing 2-storey houses. So the principle of a large building in this location wouldn't be out of character. As such, the scale and size of the building is considered appropriate within its location. With respect to its design, it's a modern, contemporary design. It's been carefully considered so as not to create an inharmonious addition to Lakeside Boulevard and the prevailing character of the area. The overall design has evolved through amendment, originally projecting brickwork and balcony panels on the front elevation, projecting full-height windows facing Windscar Road. These have been removed to be replaced with recessed frontage and balcony on the first 2 floors and Juliet-style patio windows on the upper 2 floors. So looking at the elevation below, that's the rear elevation. There are no rear windows proposed on the main elevation of the 4-storey element. On the rear of the 3-storey element facing Windscar Road, there are 6 windows on the 1st and 2nd floors. However, 5 of these windows serve a corridor or storeroom, and 1 window on both of the floors serves a kitchen, so raising no adverse issues of overlooking. So this slide's called side elevations. They're not exactly side elevations when you look at the key. The top elevation is the Lakeside Boulevard frontage, showing the Undercroft parking, whilst the bottom is a rear view of the 3-storey element and gable side of the 4-storey, which will be a living or green wall. Materials will be agreed via condition, along with a management and maintenance plan for the landscaping, including the green walls. Objectors have raised concerns over loss of light and overshadowing as a result of the development. The applicant has addressed this and provided an outlook and daylighting study at the request of officers to fully consider this issue. So this study is the most recognised measure for ensuring adequate daylighting to neighbouring properties. And the study shows the development meets the required standards. In addition, the transitional developer guidance also ensures that properties benefit from minimal levels of daylighting. It advises that acceptable daylighting of interiors is usually achieved if a 25-degree angle is drawn from a point 2 metres above the floor of the facade isn't obstructed. The site section that you can see in the bottom right-hand corner demonstrates an unimpeded 25-degree look angle from the centre of the window to the rear-facing elevation of the property. And it also uses a worst-case scenario of a 1.5 metre point rather than 2 metres, therefore demonstrating that the neighbours won't be adversely affected by overshadowing or daylighting. So this is the ground and first floor layouts. There's the main pedestrian entrance from Lakeside Boulevard with ground floor Undercroft parking. The overall accommodation provided would be 4 one-bedroomed, 2-persons apartments, 9 2-bedroomed, 4-person apartments, and 1 3-bedroom, 6-person apartment. There's no windows on the rear of the building for the 4-storey element on upper floors. There's also a corridor separating the apartments from the external wall. This is also repeated on the upper floors. All apartments meet internal space standards and Policy 45 in terms of M42 and M43 provision. So here we've got a few CGIs that show the overall finished development and what it would look like. So this first one is a view from the front corner on Lakeside Boulevard. So the overall design, it's been evolving through amendments and discussion with the urban design officer. The scheme originally proposed projecting full-height windows facing Windscar Road. These have now been removed and replaced with recessed frontages and a balcony on the first 2 floors and a Juliet-style patio window on the upper 2 floors. The flat roof element, whilst not characteristic of the area, isn't visually out of place, given that this will be a landmark building. So a slight deviation from existing character is acceptable, subject to design elements acknowledging the local context. So, for example, the external materials will be similar to those existing. This view shows the front amenity area and what it could look like. It proposes a central landscape feature on the main Lakeside Boulevard frontage of the apartment building. A landscape master plan is submitted, which indicatively shows this planting. However, final details will be subject to condition. There'll also be a living or green wall on the side gable elevation facing the existing block of apartments. This will add a feature of interest when viewing the site from the north. There's also a green wall proposed on the rear elevation wall. So this view is from Winscar Road, and it shows the vehicle access to the undercroft and the rear parking areas. So this is an aerial view of the site and how the development would sit within the local context. In terms of 106 contributions, the size of this development falls below the triggers requiring affordable housing, education, or public open space. So in summary, the principle of developing the site is acceptable, having regard to its designation for housing in the local plan. The development represents an efficient use of the site. It's within a sustainable location. The proposal would provide a landmark building within a prominent site. It provides an acceptable level of amenity for existing and new residents, helps to protect and enhance the existing area, and accords with all relevant development plan policies. Whilst further details have been requested by the Council's drainage team, given that this is a small site with an existing large built-up residential area, it's considered reasonable to require these details via drainage condition. So on balance, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Andrea. We've now got Miss Julie McLatchy, I hope I pronounced that right, a member of the public who's requested to speak in opposition to the application. Is she here? If you'd like to come down to the front. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the large red button when you want to speak, and again to mute the microphone when you've concluded, and we'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Good afternoon, everyone. I feel that the proposed development would have a negative impact on our properties for the following reasons. Firstly, the application states that this is a 4-storey building. This is very misleading, as it is in fact 5 stories high. This would make the proposed development significantly higher than the neighbouring apartment block and will have a detrimental effect on existing properties, as it would completely overshadow them. I've looked at the daylight study that has been submitted by the applicant, and this shows that some parts of my property and that of my close neighbours would be in shadow during the day, when at present they are not. The applicant has proposed that the height of the building will be reduced by 0.5 metre, but this will have a minimal impact of daylight reaching our properties. The rear of my property will be surrounded on all sides by high buildings, and so the development cannot fail to overshadow my property. The urban design officer states that the application should be amended with regards to the appearance of the rear and side elevations to the property by installing a so-called green wall. This would mean that a stainless steel trellis would be erected and climbing plants would be planted in raised beds or troughs. The pictures of the planting do not demonstrate how the walls would look once the planting had been completed. In particular, the climbing plants suggested by the applicant would not cover the entire wall, as none of them are able to grow to the full height of the building. I have noted that the rear of the apartment block would be built at the minimum distance from the rear of my property. However, I may in the future apply to add an extension to my property. Would this have implications on any planning permissions, as the 2 buildings would then be closer together? With regard to car parking, my back garden is not very long, so any cars coming into the car park would be parking directly behind my wall, and so this would have a negative impact with regards to noise pollution. The applicant intends to install additional lighting to the car park to make it more safe and secure. However, this lighting will have a negative impact on neighbouring properties, as these lights would be switched on throughout the night and will shine directly into our properties. There would also be excessive noise pollution from numerous cars entering and exiting the car park. This would also have an impact on pedestrians using the public footpaths surrounding the building, as they would be forced to walk past the entrance to the underpass, where cars would be entering and leaving, potentially causing accidents. There's already an ongoing problem with cars parking on the Winscar Road estate and also on Lakeside Boulevard. Cars who are not visitors to the residents on the estate will cause obstructions and restrict access to residents' properties. Therefore, any extra cars coming to the apartments will exacerbate the parking issues. The car park does not have the capacity to accommodate all cars for residents of the apartment building, let alone any visitors to the apartments. The applicant's response to a shortfall in visitor parking states that a lay-by to the north of the development has space to absorb extra requirement. However, this is not the case. It's also been suggested that it will force people to seek sustainable transport options. Lack of parking does not force people onto public transport, it just forces them to look elsewhere for parking, namely our estate. This is particularly noticeable on match days when the estate is crammed with cars. Bin store. The resite of the bin store for easy access by refuse collectors will now be situated directly behind my neighbour's wall. This will cause unpleasant odours and noise pollution, but could also be a haven for vermin, flies, etc.
1 minute remaining.
The plans for our estate, when built back in 2014, stated that the area of land to be built on was intended for use as future retail development. Why then is the council considering allowing planning consent for an apartment block to be built here? This proposed development appears to have been designed without any consideration towards neighbouring properties, and I would ask whether this is something that anyone here would want to see at the end of their own back gardens. I would suggest that it isn't. Finally, I would like to say that I strongly oppose this application and would ask the Chair and the committee to refuse this application. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you for that. Do any committee members have any questions? No? Thank you for your submission. We've now got Mr Neil Cook, the agent for the applicant that's requested to speak in support of the application. It's now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. If you'd like to press the large red button when you're ready to start, and then again to mute it when you've completed, and I will let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to set a timer because I've written reams here. There's no chance of getting through all this. But first, I'd like to say I'm an architect. I live and work in Doncaster. I've worked in Sheffield for over 10 years on national, international projects. I've grown frustrated seeing Lakeside develop with often quite mediocre schemes. You know, we've got, if you look on this visual here, you've got buildings with postage stamp windows, metal contraptions as balconies, really cramped, really traditional, uninspiring roofs. And as someone who worked in Sheffield, thinking, why can't we do better than this in Doncaster? This is a really massively important gateway, and we're really going to let a house builder put, you know, a blown up house on this site and ruin what could be a really good opportunity for the face of Doncaster. So this site was bought in 2020. So we've kind of, I've not even started my time, I'm going to have to guess how long I've got. So this was bought in 2020, we did a pre-app in 21, and we've developed over many years and did a formal application in 2023 and have taken on board comments. And over that time carefully looked at the context. So as you can see from this slide, we've looked at having high quality, full height windows, all with views over the lake. It's important to say as well that there's a spine corridor at the back, so there's no views at the back of the development. This is all looking out towards the lake, so we've foregone what could have been twice the accommodation just to make sure we don't overlook onto anyone else's site. And we've used the roof space of the, so if you could go back to that first slide again, I'm just, we've used the roof space, so the ridge line is very similar. We've just, rather than having a big traditional roof, we've put more accommodation there. That gives us slightly more presence on the corner, but that was felt that this is important for this site. Next slide. Yeah, this is like a pocket park because I lived around the corner from this site, so know it very well. And it's a massively well-used walking and running route. So I thought it could be quite nice, people having a place to stop off or have a coffee, meet people, and also for residents to come down and enjoy a bit of space outside. So that could be a really key feature, giving back to the sort of public realm. And another key thing, I mean, we've shown this star jasmine on this visual, which can climb to 9 meters actually. That's planted straight in the ground, so it'll have no problems. But this is because we've pushed our building as far forward as we can to limit the impact on the back, that this elevation becomes quite visible. So rather than having a brick monolith, we wanted something a bit more softer in the context. I'm cutting loads out because 5 minutes is not enough to talk about this. The next one, so this is showing the access. We've kept the strong building line and how we step down to be contextual to the houses next door. This is the access to the parking, which we've gone way beyond the requirements for parking. I don't know about the comments about we're relying on lay-bys. We're not. We need 21 spaces to meet policy. We've got 24 on the site. A friend of mine who lived in the block next door, he had one space for a two-bed apartment. We've got more than double that. And it's worth saying all of our apartments are accessibly designed so they can be used for people. Wheelchair access can be adapted. We've really gone through with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that all works. Yeah, going through sort of to the next slide. I think this is the aerial context. Yeah, so this is just showing how, you know, the need for a really key gateway here, single aspect. You know, the houses on Windscar actually overlook its own development. They're way closer than our property, and also the other block is looking straight on the garden. That same estate has got a nearly 8-storey block right butt against a 2-storey house. So we've complied with all policy, the 25-degree angle and the overshadowing studies were far more sensitive in that regard. So yeah, if you could put the next one, I think we've got I've got an animation which helps describe this. It should answer a lot of questions and help you sort of understand the design. So pop this on. Might have to cut it short if it runs over, sorry. Because I thought this might bring it to life and help explain the design. So as you can see, we've got the pocket park, the balcony, so opposite are UPVC ones from the Keepmoat site. We're trying to go for a lot higher quality, something of a bit of a beacon on the corner where it's away from the houses. And then sort of as it drops down, we've got all the parking hidden at the back. We did think about a gateway there, so it's not attracting anyone to the back, but I don't think that's advisable. There is a sort of things I wanted to talk about, which things can be conditioned on this design. So the landscape design, I didn't want to open a can of worms. Planners are probably rolling their eyes at me, but I put a belt of trees at the back, and those windows could be obscured potentially, but there's no overlooking at the back. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Mr. Cook.
Thank you.
Do any committee members wish to ask any questions? Right, I'm going to go to Councillor Cox and Councillor Mounty, then Councillor Hogg.
Thank you. Who would maintain the green space?
It'd be the developer, the owner of the building. They'd have a maintenance plan. I think it's carries on indefinitely, but they have to ensure, say, the trees. For example, there's 2 trees that are dying on the site. They've got canker. We're putting 9 back in, but that have to be sort of upheld with a maintenance plan, as well as obviously the green elements and the planting at the front.
That's great, but I mean, we know that there's issues with the cost and to residents. That obviously won't be something that you'd.
Oh no, wouldn't be passed on.
Would you make that completely clear if you were granted?
It'd have to be, yeah, just it'd be incumbent on the developer. Yeah, it's not anything. No owner of the flat could take on, you know, the wider site. That'd have to be the developer who'd have to do that. That's something I'm quite keen to sort of make sure is in place.
My other one is about lighting, and I think the resident had a very valid point regarding parking at the back and the lighting thereof.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it will be illuminated.
The parking can have low-level lighting, not dissimilar to sort of the block. The big block we're next to on the left there has got parking at the back right up against these houses, so it'd be not dissimilar to that. But I was really keen on this because my friend who lives next door in that other block of flats is like, don't put any pressure around there. You on match day try and find a space. A few years ago you might have been able to, but over time obviously it was always earmarked to be quite densely developed as a gateway and with other uses. So we're keen to make sure we exceed that, because I thought in no way can we spill over into the local area. That was a priority.
Councillor Hogarth.
On the visuals, very good, but I didn't notice any electric car charging points. Is there plans, and how will they decide who's got them?
I think we will have to do that. I think it's a planning requirement now. It used to be in the bill. Andrew knows better than me probably. I think it is actually a planning requirement to do that. So I've seen it in recent approvals where it's a condition, you have to provide that. So it'll just have to be, each of these spaces will be designated to the flat. So it's not a scrap, who goes where. You'll have your own space and that'll have the charging for it.
To clarify, that is part of the condition, I take it.
When we come back to officers, if you make a note of it and you can clarify that for us. Yeah, okay. Then I've got Councillor Mousey, then Councillor Amy Dixon.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask you, sir, Mrs McClutchy, can I comment on the fact that I'm looking at it very carefully here. She rightly said, in my looking at the plans here on page 86 and 87, there is actually 5 stories there, not 4. What is that ground space used for?
I must admit, I've read Julie's initial representation, and I did have that same question, because I think it's because we've actually removed the bottom 2 flats on the big block to make more parking, because we didn't want to, made sure we had that provision. So I think it might be that there's an undercroft and then 4 stories. I did wonder that, because to my mind it's 5.
You're looking at this picture here.
Yeah.
On page 86, right, and page 87. It shows there quite clearly that the ground floor. What is that used for? Because that is part of that building. Therefore, that front part is a 5-storey, not a 4-storey building. Am I right?
I had the same question, John, as yourself, because nowhere have I said this is a 4-storey building. That our proposals have always been that. But I think it must be, as planners, it might be a question for them, but probably because we've got like a void, we had to take out 2 floors to give more parking, which was no small thing with the viability, like you mentioned. And I think we've got 4 floors of accommodation above that. I think it might be to do that.
Forgive me for asking, but Chair, nowhere here, Chair, does it say 5-storey, it says 4-storey.
Yeah, Councillor Mousey, what we'll do is, because the report's been put together by the planning officer, we'll get them to clarify when we're going to debate for you. Yeah, okay. Councillor Amy Dixon, please.
You said that some of the parking, if required to be disabled, could be adapted.
Yeah.
So is that also for the charging points?
I think, I don't know off the top of my head, because we'll have to do it anyway, it'll be a condition, but I think it's a percentage has to be electric charging points. So, I'm quite for that. I've got a sort of hybrid car. I think we should maybe go that way, but we'd have to put them in no matter what anyway. But,
there's like a standard for disabled,
yes.
charge points.
Yes.
And I think if you were going to do that, it'd have to be up to the proper standard.
Yes, yeah. I've worked with a landscape architect I used to work with actually in Sheffield, in a really big company I used to work at. I've not tried to guess any of that. They know the standards, so they've helped me do the layouts for that.
Okay, committee members, do we have any more questions? Okay, thank you for that. If you'd like to press the large red button, that'll turn your microphone over. We're going to go into debate, and it's the opportunity for you to have a discussion, talk to the officer. So I think if we give the officer the opportunity now to respond to the clarification that you've raised regarding the electrical charging points, and obviously how many levels there are to the building.
It's 4 stories. There is on the ground floor, it's the undercroft parking, and then there's 4 stories above. In terms of the EV charging, that would come under building regulations, so they do need to provide that.
Councillor Dixon, then Councillor Mountain.
That bottom part, are you saying that is it underground car parks type of thing? The ground floor? Yeah. Are you saying it's underground, but it didn't say it here. But, okay, thank you, Chair.
I know there was some work going on, about charge points and what we could or couldn't ask as a council and planning. I don't know if, Emma, are you aware of it? In terms of accessibility. I just wondered whether we'd moved anything on that. So whether if would we be able to put a condition on if somebody was disabled, required this, it would be up to like the past standards. Can we do that as a council?
So because it's covered by the building regulations, we're not able to replicate that via condition on the planning permission, but what we can do is impose an informative, and I think that's what we've been talking about more recently, so that it strongly encourages the PAS standard to be followed in meeting those building regulations, which we could include if members granted permission today.
Councillor Selfie.
I want to ask the officer, the style will be out of character with the surrounding the other building, because the other all have a roof. This one is flat. Will we look out in that area? Thank you.
Are you talking about the flat roof being out of character?
Yeah. Yes.
It is different. It's slightly different to anything immediately around there. It's all pitched roof housing and apartment blocks, but it doesn't have to replicate what's already there. It can still suggest and offer something slightly different as long as it takes on some of the local context. In this case, there will be materials that will reflect what's existing, and there's other certain features that are reflective of what's surrounding. But you also have the apartment blocks. There's quite a variety in the materials and the designs of those apartment blocks immediately adjacent. So the fact that there is a flat roof proposed with this development, it isn't an automatic, no, it's completely out of character. It's an automatic, no, we won't support it. There's other elements of the design that's taken into consideration as well. It is a landmark building as well. It will be a gateway. It forms part of the gateway into Doncaster. It's a main road, a main thoroughfare. So there's tall buildings on there. So something different, that's slightly different, shall we say, doesn't mean that it's not acceptable.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for answering that.
I've got Councillor Stapleton and Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair. I actually quite like the design of that. I think it's really good, as I say, as a gateway building. It's very striking. Just to mention on the flat roofs, is it, I don't know, from a legal perspective, is it possible to put a condition that the flat roof cannot be used as a communal area, as how often happens in London? You know, it's all of a sudden a bit of a railing goes up and everybody's up there with the raised garden beds and growing whatever else, and they're definitely overlooking, and it changes the aspect then. Thank you.
Yeah, let me set your mind at rest with this one. There is no plant going on the roof. The roof will not be used for any rooftop garden or anything. We didn't want any further height on this building.
Thanks for that. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair. As we mentioned about overshadowing, the overshadowing is that we know of old that some of the stuff that comes into here will say there's no overshadowing, but once that building's up, it's too late. That overshadowing occurs, we know that it does, because we've lived that life. And I know you can't give 100% guarantees that it isn't going to overshadow, but are you very confident that there will be no overshadowing whatsoever, and I mean whatsoever, on the next door premises?
I was just going to go on to the slide that shows the daylighting, but it seems to have stopped working. On the back of your report, Appendix 6, it does show the daylighting study. So this daylighting study that's been carried out, it's the Building Research Establishment Standard, and it is a recognised standard for assessing daylighting and outlook. This conforms with that, with the standard and the recommendations within that standard. So that's really all I can say in that respect. I can't give any guarantees. What I can say is it does comply with this standard.
We know from a family member that sadly isn't with us anymore that we were told that this standard was used previously, and she ended up passing her last days in a house that was overshadowed, when we were told that it would never overshadow. using these standards, and it absolutely did. So, you know, I mean, obviously you can't guarantee, but I mean, I think like Gary said, it's a lovely looking building. But firstly, we've got the potential of 5 floors when it's, yeah, there's four that's living on accommodation and 1 that is for parking. So potentially, you know, really that could be 5. And the overshadowing aspect, and I know it's not in the gift of this authority to recommend different companies and landscaping issues, but we know there is an issue that this authority has regarding fleece management. But I'm sorry, I'm out. I've given up with this one. Thank you.
Councillor Beach and Councillor Stapleton.
Yes, a couple of quick questions. One is on the CGIs, it shows that the finish of the building is a light colour as the adjoining one. I take it that is what colour it is going to be. So it's part of the fitting in with the local, you know, the local that there. It's the building you can just see to the left. That's a light colour as well. So that's going to be a light colour. I mean, it's not just a pretty picture.
No, the final choice of external materials will be agreed via condition. Yeah.
The other thing, and I need a bit of explanation with this, I'm looking at the picture of that Councillor Cox has just been on about the overshadowing. The line, the dotted line drawn from the top corner of the one part of the building goes straight across in front of the new building. So, to my mind, that does look as though it's going to be overshadowed partially. Ah, I see. Yeah. Ah, I'm with you now. Okay, thank you. I know the area, but not that well.
Councillor Stapleton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Andrea, just going back to this overshadow, I just want to clarify something. Maybe it's me being a bit uneducated. With overshadowing, and I understand why there's concern from people that, but clarify, there is no such thing as right to light, is there? Am I correct in that?
No, there is no right to light, but we do ensure there's no loss of outlook, and we do ensure that through standards, you know, internal space standards, that there is lighting, there are windows, but there is no absolute right to light.
Yeah, Chair, if I may, it's a supplementary comment or question. Whilst there's no right to light, and I get it, the overshadowing is a concern, how much weight do we put upon overshadowing then for, if there is no legal right to light? How much weight do we give to the overshadowing side of things? That always sort of gets me a bit confused, really. It seems to contradict itself.
I think we're talking about 2 different things here with overshadowing. We're talking about, from a planning perspective, we're talking about overshadowing of a building creating a shadow over another building. And it's just that basically you're looking at the size of the building and the massing of that building that's causing any overshadowing. So it's that element, not the loss of light, it's the overshadowing of a building.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Just a moment. Councillor Beach, would you just turn your microphone off on me, please? Thank you. Councillor Cox.
With the issue that we had, we asked enforcement to go and have a look, see if the building had been built in the right place. Because we assumed that the graphs and all the data that came in were correct. The graphs and all data were correct, but the shadowing were horrendous. It meant that the downstairs of the dormer bungalow was in darkness the majority of the day. So I'm just giving clarity to why I'm against it.
The information that we've got. Thank you. Are there any other comments relating to the officer or no? Okay. Is there a proposal to grant planning permission subject to the conditions? Is there a move for the recommendation, please? So you want an amendment to the proposal to include the informative? Can we do that, Emma?
Yep, we absolutely can include that as an informative. And Andrea's also just mentioned to me that we need to include a condition that deals with management of the landscaping scheme as well as just the provision and approval of the details, so we can do that.
Okay, so therefore the proposal to move the recommendation with the informative and the landscaping scheme to be agreed. Are you moving that then, Amy? Yeah, is there a seconder for that then, please? Councillor Beach has moved that. Can we show of hands in favour then, please? Can you raise your hands so you can count them? Those against? Abstentions? Therefore, that application has passed subject to the conditions stated. Thank you. Item 6 on our agenda is for information only. Does any member wish to speak on this? No? Okay, then members, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the business at today's meeting. I'd like to thank everybody for their attendance, and I now declare the meeting closed.